Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Harnessing the Power of Primary Sources, How Libraries Empower Innovative Teaching Strategies, which is sponsored by ProQuest, part of Clarivate. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put some links in the chat for where you can register for upcoming webinars or watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers or to share any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we are ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Jody.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today for this session entitled Harnessing the Power of Primary Sources, How Libraries Empower Innovative Teaching Strategies. Libraries often provide a range of traditional archival materials, such as manuscripts and maps, alongside non-traditional sources like radio broadcast or grassroots organizational records and memorabilia. Today, our panelists will share how library partnership can empower innovative teaching strategies through using both traditional and non-traditional primary sources. Today's presenters include Dr. Kathleen Hilliard. She's the Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Education at the Department of History, Iowa State University, and she also serves as the Vice President of the Teaching Division of the American Historical Association. Her research and teaching delve into critical aspects of American history with a focus on informal economies, slavery, and the emancipation in the 19th century American South. Professor Hilliard is the author of Masters, Slaves, and Exchange, Powers Purchase in the Old South. She joins us to discuss practical strategies for utilizing library resources and archives. Also presenting today is Dr. Susie Woo, Professor of American Studies at California State University, Fullerton. Professor Woo's research delves into the intersections of U.S. militarism in the Pacific, race and migration, with a particular focus on Korean children and women during and after the Korean War. Her book, Framed by War, Korean Children and Women at the Crossroads of U.S. Empire, examines how Korean figures such as orphans, adoptees, and brides became central to the U.S. involvement in the region. Today, she will share some of the innovative assignments that she used to introduce students to digitized primary sources. And lastly, Dr. Lisa Arellano. She is currently visiting scholar in women's, gender, and sexuality studies at Mills College at Northeastern. She previously held the position of Associate Professor and Director of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Colby College. Her first book, entitled Vigilantes and Lynch Mobs, Community, Nation, and Narrative, examines vigilante violence in the United States. Professor Arellano also serves as the co-editor of Queer Past, the director of Queest, a queer history app, and the co-founder of Justice Stories, a Bay Area-based social justice mapping project that's focused on kids and families. Today, she will be sharing her expertise of engaging students with unique and non-traditional archival resources. I am your moderator for this session, Jody Johnson. I am Product Marketing Manager supporting the Primary Source Historical Collections. And lastly, we are joined by Daniel Lewis, who I will take a moment to boast. This year celebrates his 25th year curating and supporting rare and archival primary source collections with ProQuest. Daniel will be helping to monitor the chat and assist with any collection-based questions that you may have. So please do feel free to reach out to him and tell him hello and where you're from if you're so inclined. And throughout the presentation, please do share your questions to our group in the chat. We will do our best to respond to as many as time allows during the Q&A at the end of the session. And we also encourage you to please stay until the very end because we will share some of the links that our presenters reference during their presentations. So leading off our presentation today is Dr. Kathy Hilliard, who, leveraging her expertise in dual roles as both a professor and vice president of AHA's teaching division, she will shed light on the challenges and opportunities she's seen in working with primary sources. And her part of our presentation is entitled, Do Your Own Research, Using Primary Sources to Develop Expertise and Skills in College Classrooms. Dr. Hilliard.
Thanks, Jody. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I have to admit, I've been a little bit apprehensive about this talk. It isn't that I doubt the importance of primary sources in university teaching. I mean, it's central to what I do. But, you know, what can I say to a group of people whose careers are dedicated to making accessible scholarly research? And especially for the humanities, many of the sources that inform it. I think I may very well be preaching to the choir here. Well, an answer came to me just over a week ago on March 11th, which was the 4th anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaration of a global pandemic. News and social media were awash with recollections. And, you know, I remembered my worries for my family, the challenges of pandemic teaching, the political turmoil that embroiled every single issue, and one debate in particular. Amidst the shutdowns and the vaccine rollouts, a breach emerged between those who cried, "Listen to the experts," and those that exhorted, "Do your own research." And I'm sure you all remember the many memes and political cartoons that kind of emerged as we navigated this seemingly intractable divide. So of all of the things that agitated me during the COVID era, I found this hyper-polarized debate particularly discomforting. Why? Well, again, I think this audience probably understands. We're all experts here. In my case of 19th century America, and I've earned it, and I want people to listen to me. But I'm also a teacher who tells her students that they should leave my class with more questions than answers. Do your own research, I say. Gather the data, evaluate the evidence, draw conclusions, and substantiate them with what you've found. So, do your own research versus listen to the experts. Well, that's a false dichotomy at best. Really, what we want to see is this. This is a photo of a former undergraduate of mine, Crystal Brandenburg, pursuing a question, doing her own research on the women's suffrage movement at the New York Public Library. And then a year later, having assessed the data, evaluated the literature, and having worked with myself and a few of my colleagues, presenting that material in a public talk to the Ames, Iowa community as a budding expert in her field. Now, Crystal's an exceptional student. She's gone on to doctoral study and is just beginning to showcase her research on a national stage. Most of my students at the Iowa State University of Science and Technology are not Crystal. They're not in the discipline of history or the humanities for the long haul. But that doesn't mean I don't have something to teach them. Our challenge as scholar teachers is the same, whether we're training our students to evaluate the past or to engage meaningfully in the present. how can we help our students develop the skills, judgment, and expertise to navigate their data-rich worlds? Now, the answer, of course, is to immerse them in the world of inquiry and research and introducing method and steadily building skill sets to understand the worlds of past and present. But what's the best way to do that? Here, I've thought a lot about my own experience as a budding researcher and whether it translates to the 21st century classroom and the experiences of my own students. So let me explain what I mean here. I was lucky to have grown up as a scholar just as the internet came into popular usage. So for reference, I logged onto the World Wide Web for the first time in the computer lab of my university in the fall of my junior year of college. So this meant that for most of my time as an undergraduate and a grad student, I pursued research questions in mostly analog ways. I spent time in archives across the Southeast and hundreds of hours in the basement of my university library in front of a microfilm reader, scrolling page by page through volumes of antebellum newspapers and plantation prescriptive material. So I know how archives work. I get how collections are cataloged, the way information is nested and arranged or potentially arranged. I understand how a 19th century newspaper is laid out. I know how documents, how data lives in space, how information is structured, because I've seen it. There's a materiality to it. And this analog knowledge helped me so much as I quite eagerly, took advantage of the many digital resources and tools that would emerge over the next 25 to 30 years. Now, for the most part, my digital native students don't have that analog background. What they know is easily accessible abundance, or what they think is easily accessible abundance. Asking novice students to simply jump in and do their own research often involves them dipping into what they think is a big old bucket of undifferentiated and unstructured information. They've just got to figure out the right set of keywords to scoop out exactly what they need. But even deploying those world-opening keywords requires background knowledge and study. It goes without saying that the terms Latinx or African American probably aren't going to draw up many hits and queries of early 19th century sources. But even with the best prompt engineering, and even in the best curated collections, some of which we're going to talk about today, their queries sometimes result in either deafening silence or an overwhelming cacophony of hits that obscure more than they reveal. Too often, left unguided, I see students simply pack it in at this point. On the one hand, some get discouraged because the voices they want to see represented or they want to hear aren't immediately apparent. And therefore, they kind of throw their hands up and declare that they are unfindable. And on the other hand, they just get overwhelmed because they're not instinctively adept at focusing on the signal and tuning out the noise. So there is simultaneously everything and nothing there. So what's the result? Well, I genuinely celebrate the agency of my student investigators and really all budding researchers out there. I understand the potential pitfalls. There's a difference between allowing a range of primary sources, the data, to drive inquiry, and simply cherry picking the 5 or 6 pieces of information that confirm our or their inclinations. We preach the value of evidence-based judgments, but it's really so easy to develop a narrative predetermined, and then to simply hang evidence upon it, just as if we're decorating a Christmas tree. So, you should be thinking at this point, these methodological and pedagogical challenges aren't new. But I would argue that the appearance of ease and abundance is. And it requires that we think carefully about how we talk to our digital native students about labor and process. So how do we do that? In my surveys, in my methods classes, with my graduate students, I'm having to double down. And I actually increasingly find myself reaching back to kind of an analog toolbox, not to demonstrate the superiority of old ways, but to make visible the hierarchies, the structures, the networks that inform history and inform how history is made and preserved and curated and displayed, so that they can use the resources and digital tools more effectively. I wanted to share with you an article from Perspectives in History, which is the monthly magazine of the American Historical Association. It's from 2007 and remains one of the most downloaded articles in the magazine's history. What does it mean to think historically, the two authors ask? The answers they provide can be applied broadly, telling us something about the past, but also helping uncover something of the process and method that is so crucial to helping students develop the skills, judgment, and expertise to navigate their very rich worlds. Andrews and Burke outlined 5 concepts identified here. Perhaps they are obvious to all of us, but I find that this clear designation helps my students see more clearly how facts and evidence and data and sources dwell and relate to each other in space and time. It gets them thinking about how primary sources speak to us and to each other. So first, change over time. To the unpracticed, the study of history is simply lining up the facts in order. At my STEM-centric university, my colleagues and I joke that we could probably earn ourselves a hefty raise if we started calling ourselves chronological engineers. But let's face it, that would be a misnomer. It would be a betrayal of what we do. It's not enough simply to understand where a source sits on a timeline, but to understand how our sources reflect change or continuity. And that chronology means nothing without context. Does the information students gather reflect embedded patterns or disruptive moments? How would we know? What structures, cultures, economic realities shape the world in which this source was produced? It's important, too, for students to understand that we're not simply looking for function, what happened and how, but for causality. We're looking for the why. What motives or interests or sources of power does this source reflect? And what are the shifting, multivalent, and contingent factors that build to particular moments? One of the hardest things for many new students to understand is that linearity is rare, especially rare in productive research. So taken together, students should garner a new understanding of what complexity means. Understanding how sources are produced, preserved, and organized, how they sit in time and space historically, how they build, sometimes haphazardly, to particular moments is crucial to getting past oversimplified binaries that quick searches and easy skims sometimes produce. I hope that these concepts are as useful to you as they have been to me as you work with students to navigate university learning. Certainly, I can speak for my colleagues and say we appreciate the work that you all do. I'm going to pass it over to Susie and Lisa to talk specifics now about how they guide and encourage their students to build expertise and knowledge through the type of primary source research that we all do in our classrooms. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hilliard. Before we move to Dr. Woo, that was so fascinating. Thank you for sharing these different angles of historical inquiry and thinking historically. And to our attendees, I want to ensure that we will share the link to the article that Dr. Hilliard referenced at the end of this presentation. So please do stick around. And as we go to the next presenter, we do have an interactive poll question for our attendees. Does your library provide primary source collections? You'll see the poll pop up on the screen, and we invite you to respond, and the poll will also close automatically in just a moment. The next presentation in our lineup is entitled Bringing Students into the Digital Archive. And we have had a question about how to organize programs to get students into the library. And I think that the presentations that we have lined up today will help answer that. So I invite Dr. Susie Woo to please share some of the methods that she uses to introduce students at different levels to primary source archives from the library.
Great. Thanks so much, Jody. Kathy, I love hearing how you help your students become effective student investigators. And so thank you so much. I really enjoyed your talk. Thanks also to Jody Johnson and Daniel Lewis for inviting us to join you all today, and to Sabrina Koffer and Ashley Roy for all the tech help, and all of you for coming. I wanted to start by just saying how much I love the archives, and I'm so grateful for the digitization of materials. Digital archives have radically changed how I conduct research and has made it possible for me to help students access the collections. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I wanted to begin by sharing 3 goals that I have for my students when teaching digital archives. First, I want to get them excited about the wealth of resources that they can access for free and from the comfort of their own computer or library. And I want them to know about these resources, not just for my class, but for other classes, and to also help them dream about future projects. Some of them will go on to write a senior thesis project. And so I want them to get excited about the archives in that way. And finally, I really want to help them feel comfortable and confident using these databases and analyzing the material that is within them. And so I'm going to talk about an assignment, or a couple assignments, that I teach in 3 different classes. And these classes are really different. So for American Studies 131, Migrant Lives, this is a small team taught course that I teach with a couple other faculty on campus. And we're all from different colleges. And most of the students in this class are freshmen. Some of them are undeclared, and almost all of them are new to Cal State Fullerton. The second class that I'm going to talk about is American Studies 324, and this is American Immigrant Cultures. And this is a very different class. This usually has over 100 students. It's fully online, and it's a GE class. So this is mostly non-American studies majors. I have a whole mix of students here. And the final class that I wanted to talk about is American Studies 401T, which is a capstone course for American Studies minors and majors. And I teach the course on race and American studies. So these are 3 very different classes, 3 groups of students who are at different points in their college career. Some have never stepped foot in the library, but regardless of where they're at, I feel that all the students really benefit from conducting archival research, where they get to learn about history firsthand and are actively challenged to use their own critical thinking and analytical skills to make sense of the materials that they find. And I think it's also just a great opportunity to allow students to connect the past and the present on their own. So I'm going to begin with an assignment that I bring to the first 2 classes. So for the 131 class and the 324 class, I assign work with the Immigration and Naturalization Services database. And so this is an assignment that looks very similar for both of the classes. So I'll just talk about it together. So I wanted to back up and say that this was a trial database, a trial ProQuest database that we had access to for 1 year. And I learned about this from the College Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences. So Dean Jessica Stern offered a $500 grant for faculty who can incorporate 1 or more of the trial databases into our classes. So when I found out that one of them was the Immigration and Naturalization Services database, I jumped at the chance, and I applied and got the grant, which gave me the time that I needed to develop the assignment that I'm about to share with you. And a fun outcome of this was that the first year that I taught this database, students in my classes ended up using that database more than all of the UC campuses combined for that year. So Dean Stern shared with me that this database had 2,523 retrievals from our campus alone. And for context, the next highest usage was of the Early English Books online database, which had 267 retrievals. So this is not to toot my own horn, but this is just to say that when we really incorporate the archives into our classes, students will use it. I mean, they kind of have to because it's an assignment, but you know, they are incentivized to use the database, and I think that they get a lot from it. This high usage helped the library make the case that the university should purchase the database permanently, which they did, and so now I get to have students use this database every year. So here is the assignment that I assigned for the first two classes. And I tie this activity to a unit on immigration policy. So right after I give a lecture on early immigration laws, where we discuss the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, I schedule a library instruction with our amazing research librarian, Megan Graywing-Holt. And so for this in-person class, Megan might be on the webinar today. Hey, Megan. And so I bring my students to her because she's amazing. And so for the in-person class, I bring the students to the physical library. Our library classrooms have computers for all the students, so they could follow along and conduct their own research. For the online GE course, I usually lead a live Zoom session, so students can follow along on their own computers. So when introducing the project to the students, I always begin by emphasizing that the digital collection that they are about to explore comes directly from a physical archive. So I have Daniel Lewis from ProQuest to thank for the next two slides, which I now use in all of my classes. But I think it's really important for students to see the physical archive so they can understand how the digital version they are seeing is processed, but also to reiterate how lucky they are to be able to view this collection from California. So here is where the INS collection is held. It's at the National Archives in Washington, DC. And I like to show them the, again, this is Daniel's slide, but I want them to see the room, right, where the archives live so they can understand where the digital collection that they're looking at comes from. So I want to show them the room. I want to show them the squeaky cart that's used to bring the boxes to you when you're the researcher, how the files are organized in the box. And I wanted to show them each folder so that they know that when they open the PDF, what they're actually looking at are photographs of each page from this folder. And so I think that that's really important to give them the context of what it is that they're looking at. And one of the first things that we do, and that Megan does, is we get to show them how to navigate the digital database. How do you even access and find the collection that you need? So we start with the homepage of the library, we go to databases, we show them exactly how it is that they're going to find the Immigration and Naturalization Services folder or file. And so once we show them how to navigate to the collection, we try a search together. And so we show them this page, and the students have just finished that lecture. And so they already have some key terms. And so we usually ask the class, does anyone have an idea of what we could search together as a class? And inevitably someone will say something related to the Chinese Exclusion Act. And so I'll say, that's a great term, let's try it. So we'll type in Chinese here in the box and see what we get. And what we find, I've already looked at this, so I know what to find. I know what's going to come up are these different kinds of collections. And we choose one to dip into. I also kind of choose the one for them, but I choose this one and show them some of the materials that are in that folder. And so here's one of the things that we look at. And I always pick this one because it's very dynamic and kind of exciting. And so I have us read this page, just the first page together, and we kind of think about it as a group. And if you look closely here, when we begin reading it, we see that this page is about a person named Wang Sui, who is a Los Angeles resident, and he is bringing a complaint against an immigration officer named Miller. And the immigration officer continues to come to his place of business, which is a Chinese laundry, and he keeps demanding to see Sui's papers, his certificate of residence. And Sui says, "You have seen my paper so many times." And then Miller says, you have to show me every single time I come here. And then a fight breaks out. They call each other names. And so, we think about this. And afterwards, we talk about this document as a class, and students usually remark that in lecture, when we learned about the Chinese exclusion law, it seemed very one-directional, where the policies were being enacted against the Chinese. But how this document shows that Chinese residents also fought back and actually even used the American court system to seek justice. And so that is usually very interesting for them. And after we do this group project together, we let the students search on their own. And they get to search the database individually using their own search terms. So as Kathy mentioned, search terms could be pretty tricky, and sometimes you get a lot of things and sometimes you get nothing. So Megan and I will walk around the class to help students. Some of the terms that they've used include words like border. Some of them type in Mexico. Some of them want to know more about their personal immigration history, and so they type in words that are of interest to them. And for the asynchronous class, I have them find a document and take a screenshot and answer a few quick questions about what they found interesting about that document. And one of the things that students often find, for the students who enter in border, a lot of them will remark upon how interesting it is that in the documents from the late 1800s and early 1900s, Canada comes up so much more than Mexico. And so already they're kind of finding and discovering these interesting things about the archives that raise these questions for them that they want to learn more about. So for both the in-person and online class, I assign a worksheet to help them analyze the documents. Kathy was talking about how she asks her students to be these investigators, and I ask them to be these detectives to figure out, how much information, what evidence can they find in the document that they've discovered. So I have different sections of the worksheet. I'm just going to go through them really quickly, but I ask for basic information about the document, about who wrote it, who read or received the document, the date, different kinds of stamps or other things that they see on the document. I have them think about the content to kind of look through and see what they think is the main topic of the document. I ask them to list quotes to help push their close reading of the document. And I also ask them for historical context for them to try and connect the document to the things that we've been learning in class, either in lecture or in readings. I have a close reading section where I want them to think about the tone of the document or specific words that they're interested in contextualizing in the document. And at the end, I ask for a reflection, and I want them to share what they've learned from the process of researching the archival database. What did they learn from the process of analyzing original source documents? And I wanted to share a couple of the responses. So I've clearly selected the responses. I would say on the whole, they were all really positive. The only kind of complaint that I got is that it just takes a really long time. And a lot of them said it was sometimes hard to read language from over 100 years ago, because it's very different from the language that we use now. Some of them said that they kind of went down the rabbit hole and they found interesting documents that led them to other documents. So before they knew it, they were spending hours on the site, which I think is actually a very good positive thing. But here the student reflects upon, the student says, there's so much rich history that doesn't get covered or talked about, as it's maybe deemed not as important. I like that this assignment has opened new perspectives for myself, as my parents also immigrated from Central America, and that was the only real perspective I had. I'm glad that I was able to come out a little more knowledgeable on the experiences of other races and how they struggled to get to this country. Another student writes about how they viewed this exercise as something that they could build upon. And so this student writes, after this exercise, I look at research more as building blocks or puzzle pieces that fit together, each article linked to another, and so on. I was able to expand my understanding of each concept as I stitched each story together. So I really think that this is kind of a quick assignment. This is something that they do at the beginning of this semester in these two courses. And since a lot of them are freshmen and sophomore, sophomores, I really just want to get them interested and to know that these archives exist. And so, but even still, even with the short assignment, I feel like they do get a deep understanding of what the archives can offer them. And so for the last few minutes, I wanted to talk about what I do in the capstone course for American Studies. And this is a research seminar where students write original research papers. I ask them to use at least 5 primary source documents. These could be historical newspapers, newsreels, letters, correspondence, along with secondary sources, of course. And so for this class, I begin in the classroom by reading and analysis of various topics in the class. I have them develop their own proposal with secondary source bibliography, and then we go into the library and meet up again with Megan Braywing-Holt. I also am lucky to sometimes Megan and also Patricia Prestonary, who's our special collections archivists. When their schedules allow, they team up and they bring a lot of the archival materials that we have in our physical library, and they put them around the room so that students can kind of circulate and see what we have at Pollock Library, which is really terrific. There are pamphlets, material culture like flags and different kinds of booklets and things, so students can physically look at these items and consider them for their projects. And then we also introduce them to the digital archives. And so I wanted to share with you something that Megan has created. She's created an American Studies resource guide for all of our students. And there is a digital resource guide for every single subject, just about every single field on our campus. And so there's even a page for economics and for all the different disciplines. And so for American Studies, this is where we send our students, because this is the one-stop shop where they can find pretty much all that they need for any kind of research projects. And so if you look up here at the tabs that Megan created, there's primary sources, there's scholarly articles, secondary books, and online archives. And so I wanted to show you just a couple pages. This is the page from the primary source tab. It goes on much longer. This is just one section of what the students get to see. But since they come in already with an idea of what they're interested in, the hope is that they're going to be able to look through the digital archive selections that we have access to and be able to think about, oh, I really want to explore this one further. This is something that I think might be helpful for my topic. I think that sometimes when students see this page, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. It's so exciting that we have access to all these collections, but it could also be really overwhelming. And so having a proposal going in, I think, is a really helpful way to help them kind of narrow down where it is that they would like to begin their search. And this here are the online archives that we also have access to on our campus. And these are really terrific collections here. So like Calisphere has a great selection of photographs. We also show them that. After we visited the library, usually the students will meet with me or with Megan to dive deeper and to kind of go through the archives together. And then we come back to the classroom and we have a primary analysis workshop. And we do this in small groups. So once students have identified a few materials to work with, they bring one to share with the class. And so here, I use the 6 C's of primary sources. So Kathy had the 5 C's. I have the 6 C's. Lisa's going to give you the 7 C's. I'm just kidding. She's not going to, but we could stop at 6. But I think that this is really useful. This is from UC Irvine's history project. And kind of similar to what Kathy said, it asks students to really think deeply about the document that they're looking at. So it asks for content, for citation, for context, for connections, for communications, what does the document say to you, and for any conclusions that they could draw. So I always have students, I print this out, I bring it to the classroom so that they can all go home and physically write out what they find about their document and then bring it to the group to build upon together. And at the end, they have a small writing group where I'm a part of everyone's writing group, but we get to work on their papers together, and they submit their final research paper, which is an 18 to 20 page paper. So I found that students begin this process really overwhelmed. And then once they gain practice searching for, and especially once they find relevant materials, they are really excited by the historical evidence. So each semester I have students say, I can't believe I have access to all these collections. And my favorite is, I can't believe we get to look at things that are so old. But this is the joy of having them learn by doing, by giving them the tools and guidance. They are the ones who get to discover and analyze the materials, which is a process that they find deeply rewarding. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Woo, and thank you for the assignment ideas and for the inspiring ways to facilitate partnerships between faculty and librarians. For attendees, we will share a link to the 6 C's resource that Dr. Woo referenced, and we'll share that at the end of today's presentation. We don't want you to leave and miss any of our excellent presenters, so please do stay with us. We do have another poll question for our audience. You should see it appearing on the screen. If you are interested in learning more about the History Vault archival collections that Dr. Woo referenced, please let us know through the poll question. As we move forward now, it is my pleasure to introduce our last presenter, Dr. Lisa Arellano. Again, one of her many impressive roles is co-editor of Queer Past, an online digital collection, and her presentation today focuses on her work with that collection, and her presentation is entitled Queer Pasts and Student Futures, Special Archival Projects.
Thank you. It's been great to hear Susie and Kathleen's work. And I also want to just give Jody, David, and all the folks at ProQuest a shout out for the ways in which they support the collection of these primary documents and some really important work across the humanities. I've come to think of them more and more as a really important sort of support source for this kind of work at this time. As Jody mentioned, I'm the co-editor of Queer Pasts. Queer Pasts is a collection of primary source sets, 10 to 40 primary sources, accompanied by something we like to call a curatorial essay. So an essay that helps students look at the documents, but that leaves room open for them to work on primary documents in classroom contexts. Editorially, my co-editor and I, Mark Stein, have a real imperative to diversify the field of queer history. So we have an emphasis on projects that focus on queer people of color, on trans folks. We've also been thinking about diversity in some more capacious ways. So we have a real interest in regional diversity, in age diversity, really in just pushing the boundaries of the ways that queer history as a field has been developing up till now. We've always understood, of course, that our audience are researchers, but students as well, who might pick up a set of documents for a course or who might use one of these primary source sets in connection with another. We're always editing towards conversations between the document sets, possible combinations. But at some point, I'm sort of working on these from the editorial perspective and thinking about our students. I arrived at the idea that it would be fun to build a Queer Past collection with students. So maybe if I have one C, I thought it was a cool idea, right? I thought, okay, if students want to look at these, they really might want to build one of these. And so in the spring of 2022, I ran a digital history practicum course at Mills College in Oakland. At the time, the transition was just happening, so then still Mills College, a traditional women's campus. The project that we wrote is entitled, Are They Really? Queer Life at Mills, 1900 to 1980. And the project was really a semester-long collaboration between myself, a group of students, and the special collections librarian, Rebecca Leung, and the library director, Janice Braun. And I really want to emphasize and will emphasize as I'm talking about this, all the ways in which that collaboration was an ongoing sort of multi-class period enterprise, and the ways in which we were really able to work in combination between these different approaches in the special collections sort of room and in the library. It was a really high stakes moment for our project at Mills, because for those of you unfamiliar with the school was on the brink of closure or transitioning to a merger with Northeastern University. And so in addition to there being on a Mills sort of women's campus, a kind of unique history of queerness, there was also, I think, some really high stakes where we all felt very much enmeshed or invested in the idea of ourselves as historians, as archivists. And so I think there was a particular level of commitment around the project. So like many single-sex institutions, Mills College has a really interesting and unique history of sort of queer, proto-queer, queerish behavior on campus. What we're looking at here is a photograph from a Mills tradition called the George Washington Ball. The George Washington Ball was held between 1870, 1880s to 1930. Described as a function on the back of one of these photographs where the seniors dressed as Martha Washington and were the guests of the freshmen who dressed as George Washington. Our research indicated really that students dressed in a range of period costumes with an emphasis on male military and political figures of the period and their wives. So doing research on this topic, we came across just a sort of wealth of fascinating photos like the ones you see here. Photos that enabled the crucial questions of queer history, like how do we read these? Right? What do we call these photos? Do we recognize them? Do we not recognize them? And if so, as what? Are they lesbian photos? Are they trans history photos? Right? And sort of thinking about Kathleen's presentation, we really got to think critically about how taxonomies themselves are made, right? So this was really students not just in special collections with the documents, but also having a sort of insider view on how, for lack of a better expression, the library sausage gets made, right? What would these photos be called? How does that work? We read a lot of critical archival theory as we went along. It was a remarkable level of hands-on fun for the students. I think it was an experience that enabled them to see both that the past is quite different and the past is incredibly familiar. So lots of recognition and misrecognition. The students in my class, perhaps not coincidentally, were overwhelmingly queer students of color. And so the George Washington Ball was both queerly familiar and racially deeply alienating, I think, for my students. And all of that was really excellent fodder for thinking about how to engage with primary documents. So also within the context of working on the George Washington Ball, Rebecca directed us to this. These are excerpts from Eleanor Clark's student scrapbook. Scrapbooks are described by Margaret Mulroney as common in the early 20th century, mass-produced for the collegiate market, sold as blank books. They contain heavyweight paper pages bound between different kinds of specially commissioned covers. Students use the books to compile their own memories, pasting photos of what Mulroney calls the stuff of college: class schedules and grades, event programs, student handbooks, scraps of corsage ribbon, bits of brown paper wrapping from packages, paper napkins from picnics, foil candy wrappers. And so really the scrapbook as a kind of document is a wonderful, rich, materially cultural sort of object for students to engage with. Eleanor Clark's was a particularly interesting one for us because, and I want to stay here for a moment, on the left what you see is Eleanor Clark's dance card from the George Washington Ball, from the year that Eleanor Clark would have attended the ball dressed as George Washington, which is to say in masculine attire. One of my students became so intrigued by Eleanor and by this dance card that they spent quite a lot of time looking up each and every one of those names on the dance card, figuring out that actually Eleanor was dancing at the ball with other first-year students, which is to say other first-year students in masculine attire, which really goes so many different layers into thinking about or rethinking about or trying to understand what sorts of queer or proto-queer practices were actually happening on campus. And I think what mostly I was struck by was the extraordinary level of interest the student had in spending a lot of time doing this, and how intriguing it really was to them to be able to see or figure out something about the past in this way. We also, by the way, I should say, learned some very interesting things from Rebecca around the presence of these scrapbooks in the Mills Special Collection, the sort of acquisition of scrapbooks, how they come to be there. So again, a level of sort of meta engagement with how the library functions or works. So there were many and varied examples of gender masquerade in the Mills Special Collection. Rona Welk asserts that of all the rituals of college life, the all-women dances were among the most important, and descriptions were often erotic, and that is true. At the same time, we were very interested in suspending too many assumptions about the way our present-day queer LGBTQ taxonomies would make these images legible to us. So we really tried to stay or work in a state of suspended sort of interpretation, and also create a project that would now allow future users to come back to these primary sources and do their own thinking and work about what they might mean. But we took these questions of suspicion or misrecognition to everything we found in the archive. So here we have a photograph that came out of a vertical file labeled dating, otherwise unmarked. But one of the student researchers astutely noted when looking at this image that Mills students appeared most constrained and possibly unnatural in the archive of dating and social photographs that depicted heterosexual pairings. Are they really? She asked when she saw this image, which is where the title for the project comes from. And so it ultimately was both an inquiry around queerness at Mills, but also around normativity or heterosexuality. And I will again say, just a really fun time for the students. The last image I want to have from this project really emphasizes for me what was so important about the collaboration with the librarians. One of the most interesting questions we had during the semester came in the context of this image, which is labeled French Foreign Exchange Students and came from a folder marked Photographs, Portraits, Administration, Aurelia Henry Reinhardt. So Reinhardt was the Mills president from 1916 to 1943. So to clarify that, this image sits inside Reinhardt's collection as a sort of folder of student photographs. There is nothing about it that is either explicitly or necessarily even implicitly queer, but one of Rebecca's questions for us, and it really enabled one of the most important conversations that we had, was, does this image belong in your collection, right? Do you want to think about this? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And that sort of work, that sort of back and forth with Rebecca and with Janice was one of the most important and richest parts of the semester. I hope that other, I really, when I present this work, I often suggest to faculty that they think about ways of replicating this project on their campus. It's a kind of project I'd love to scaffold for Queer Past in other locations. I think the collaborative work between students, librarians, and professors is highly replicable. And so I want to close here by just talking about another couple of projects that are inside Queer Past that I think also are replicable and possibly provide really interesting ways for students to engage sources. So these images are from Tim Retzlaff's project called Striking Out Against the Conspiracy of Silence, 1970s LGBTQ campus organizing in Michigan student press. And what's really interesting about Tim's project is that the primary sources in it are entirely come from student newspapers throughout Michigan. And using student newspapers is a really fun way, I think, to bring students into sort of understanding primary documents and the voice of history in a different way. And so I think obviously very replicable in other environments to have students think about student newspapers on their own campus. They're also incredibly accessible, right, as sources go. So it would be a really interesting way, I think a much more straightforward way to involve students in producing a Queer Past project than the Mills approach. It could be done entirely online. It could even be produced as an end of semester project. So I really wanted to sort of shout out Tim's work as something that I think could and should be revisited in other campuses or other contexts. And these slides are from a different Queer Past project, Eric Gonzaba's Unfolding Our History, Exploring Post-Stonewall LGBTQ History with T-shirts. So Eric's work more broadly is really interested in the T-shirt as the sort of object of queer life and culture. He has a remarkable online digital archive as well, but he did for us a smaller subset of those images that really focused on a set of T-shirts, again, that help us think through certain issues in queer representation, queer self-representation, queer political articulation. I think this is also a really interesting potential way to bring students in, creating sort of an opportunity for students as archivists, right? Students themselves can create a set of documents in special collections, drawing on some of these sorts of material objects, representing their own political sort of cultural histories on campus. They can think creatively about what constitutes a document, and I think work in some very compelling ways with students on other campuses. And so I love the idea of sort of moving off of Eric Gonzaba's project to bring students in a different way. So you see here a couple of the projects I've just mentioned, my project at Mills, Tim's project, and Eric's project. We also have a couple of forthcoming campus-based projects, one coming out of UT Austin on LGBTQ history, a collaboration between Lauren Gutterman and at least one student that I'm aware of, and then a project that's being written by my co-editor, Mark Stein, that looks at LGBTQ student group recognition in the 70s, but nationally, right? And so part of the reason I wanted to look at those projects together is to just note that these two of these projects, my own and the UT Austin project, are campus-based. We have Tim's project that's more statewide, and then we have national projects. And any of those scales, I think, work collaboratively and are worth thinking about as something replicable here. And the one last thing I will say about bringing students into the creation of these projects is that it's provided an interesting opportunity to really help them think about digital production as an aspect or an extension of the humanities. So really, rather than trying to inject humanities into conversations, sort of conversations in comp sci, right, really moving out of the humanities towards some applications that I think feel very relevant and very important to students at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's so interesting to hear how you are expanding the scope of available materials in this field, and also to hear the ideas that you shared that could be replicated across campuses. We did have some questions come in, and I just want to clarify that Dr. Arellano's work is available in the collection Queer Pasts from ProQuest. If you are in the audience and you're interested in exploring the document project, Are They Really? Queer Life at Mills, 1900 to 1980, or the projects that encompass student newspapers or t-shirts or other content types that Lisa and her team have curated. If you want to explore that through a trial, please let us know through the poll question that is on the screen. And I know we don't have much time, but I would like to invite all of our panelists back to the virtual stage for a quick question and answer session. This is a great opportunity for our audience to engage directly with our experts and dive deeper into the topics that were covered. Please do feel free to continue to submit your questions into the chat. We have had a lot that have come in, both to us directly and some that have been answered throughout the presentation. And we also have 2 links to share with you in the chat from the presentation, so please make sure that you check those out. So quickly, I would like to ask first Dr. Woo and then Dr. Arellano. I think we can all benefit from your perspectives on building these fruitful partnerships between faculty and libraries in your experience. We've had a question come in on, did you find this challenging to secure support?
Thanks. I'll start. I think it is absolutely essential that we bring the students into the library. And so partnering with Megan has been easy and exciting. It's really fun to get the students out of the classroom and into the physical library where they can see some of the primary source materials firsthand, but also get used to practicing, accessing all of these digital archives. And so Megan has been great to, Megan was actually, she's an alum of our American Studies Master's program. And so we kind of have an in at the library, but I think even without that in at the library, it's been pretty easy to schedule and library instruction with our amazing research librarians. And so I think that for the students, again, some of them had never stepped foot in the Pollock Library until bringing them to this instruction. And then from there, Megan has also been incredibly open to meeting with my students. And so she makes herself really available. They come into the library, they meet with her, they sit together and go through the documents together. And so that has been absolutely essential, especially for the upper division capstone course. That is the research class. That partnership has been really integral to that project.
Thank you. And Dr. Arellano?
Well, I mean, it's funny because Susie, you were always, I like the way that you stage spontaneity for your students at the same time you understand exactly how that's going to unfurl in a non-spontaneous way. And so, in a similar vein, I actually did do quite a lot of advanced work in special collections with the librarian to sort of set up the fun surprises that were going to happen for my students, right, by culling through collections and seeing what would work or what wouldn't work. And so I think the timing on these projects can vary a great deal depending on what you're trying to achieve or what the experience you're trying to stage for your students really is.
So set your expectations. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Before we wrap up our session, I just want to thank all of our presenters for sharing with us today. Really, what a privilege to hear from each of you. So thank you for sharing. And I hope that our attendees found it as interesting and as inspiring as I did. And as we conclude today's presentation, I do want to remind you that ProQuest offers 6 centuries of primary source documents that engage, inspire, and inform researchers at all levels through archival materials, materials, historical periodicals, audio and video archives, letters and diaries, journals, reference materials, and more. And if you're interested in learning more about the scope of these historical collections through a free trial, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can easily do that through the poll question that should appear on your screen or through the email addresses that are provided on the next screen. Thank you again for joining us for Harnessing the Power of Primary Sources, How Libraries Empower Innovative Teaching Strategies. And Sabrina will now conclude our presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jody. I'll just echo you and say thank you to Kathleen, Susie, Lisa, and Jody for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to find the slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the session and hope to see you again in the near future on another webinar.